Hello and welcome to my foam skirt tutorial. I originally made this skirt for my Pennywise cosplay, however there are potentially many cosplays you could use this for. My cosplay is inspired by the Pennywise doll by Wrens Fairy Realm. I decided to use foam because I'm more confident with it than sewing. I also thought it would give great rigidity while still giving some movement. So let's start. I hope you enjoyed the tutorial. First of all, I'm making the band of this skirt. To do this, I'm making a pattern first out of cardboard. I'm making the width 2 inches. This is so it's wide enough to take the weight of the foam skirt, while still thin enough to sit flush against the body. I cut this out twice and then I'm going to duct tape them together. If you can find a bit of cardboard long enough, you obviously can skip this step. There's two options for the band. If you want the band to sit flush against your waist, keep it straight like this. The second option is to have it sit lower on your hips like this, but as you can see there's a gap at the top. So what I'll need to do is, instead of having a straight band, I need to make it curved. To do this, I'm splitting half the band into 4 sections. I draw a line at the front, I draw a line at the side, and then I find halfway and draw a line there. I find the middle of my back and draw a rough line there. I take the band off and make the lines straighter. I cut the band in half. This is because we only need half of it because we can mirror it later. I now label each section so I can tell them apart. I only have 3 sections at the moment and I need 4, so I'm going between the middle line and the back line and drawing another line halfway. Then I finish labelling. I now cut the pattern out. I'm also cutting the other side of the pattern in case I need a backup. I'm going to use masking tape to join all these together, but before I do, I am going to overlap them and give them a slight angle. I then use the masking tape to join them together. The masking tape is ideal because you can always take it off later and adjust the pattern if need be. I can now test out my band shape and instantly I can feel there's a bit of a gap here. So what I'll need to do is take these 2 joins and lessen the angle on them. So I take the duct tape off and move them into place. Testing this one out, put it flush against my body and instantly I'm very happy with that. I've chosen to make my band out of 5mm EVA foam CF100 from Poly-Props. I take my pattern and place it on the foam and draw around it. I use a ballpoint pen to get a nice defined line. I flip the pattern over and I'm now going to mirror it on the other side. I now go in with my pen and cut all the corners to curve the shape out. I opted for the CF100 because it's quite a rigid foam and hence gives a good base structure. One thing about patterns is if your foam is thicker you're going to need more foam, so I'm extending the ends, but I can always cut that off later. I cut out the band using a knife at a 90-degree angle. I've chosen 5mm because any thicker than that would stick out too much from the body. Any thinner than that, it might be a bit too flimsy and not take the weight of the skirt. Testing the band out, you can see that it's pretty much a perfect fit. At the back there is an overlap, but that's good because I'm going to add Velcro later. To make the main part of the skirt, I'm using 1mm CF100 EVA foam from Poly-Props. I now split the foam into 3 very long strips. To do this, I measure the width and divide by 3. I measure in with a steel rule, make markings and draw lines right down the length of the foam. I chose the 1mm EVA foam for this because it looks like and moves like fabric. Once these strips are joined together, they will be 6 meters long. I go in with my knife and cut the foam into strips. If you want your skirt to be the same length as mine, you will only need 1 sheet of the foam. It's 1 meter by 2 meter. I now repeat the cutting process for the other side. On 2 of the strips, I measure in 2 inches and cut that section off. The reason for this small piece of foam is to join the strips together. I then apply contact cement all over the surface. I mark out an inch section at the ends of 2 of the strips. I then apply contact cement to these sections and leave it to dry. I always use contact cement when gluing foam to foam because you get the strongest bond while still retaining flexibility. I glue the small piece of foam to the strips and make sure that the join is flush. I would then repeat the process for the second join. However, make sure the second join is on the same side. Now your foam will be 1 long strip. From the longest side of your foam, measure in 2 inches. Repeat that along the length of the foam and join all your lines together. You will now have a line going from one end of your foam to the other. I am now going to divide this into 6-inch sections. If you want your skirt to have more of a wave than mine, you could try more than 6, maybe 7 or 8 inches, but doing this would require a much longer strip of foam. Repeat this until you get to the end of the foam. Now I'll also divide the band into sections. The size of each section is going to be 1 inch. I find 1 inch is suitable because they're not too close together but not too far apart. This is a foam ruler I made once. It is great for measuring and marking curves. I mark these on with my pen. I also mark in the overlap at the end. This is where I will put the Velcro later. I then use a steel rule and the pen to draw in all the lines. Depending on the width of your hips, you'll probably end up with between 30 and 45 sections. If you want to experiment with the look of your skirt, you can always decrease or increase these sections. I'm using a scrap of the 5mm EVA foam to apply lines of contact cement. I repeat this for each line. It's important that the glue is applied right up to the very edge of the curves. This means you will have less to fix later. I then go back to my main skirt and apply the contact cement in the exact same way to the lines I've drawn there. Again, I am making sure the glue is applied right up to the edge. Remember to use thin layers of contact cement and to make sure it's dry before gluing together. When you're gluing the band to the skirt, make sure that your band is this way round, so that this part here and this part here are glued together and so on. So this is the effect you're trying to achieve. You'll create a ripple effect like this. You take a glued section from your band and a glued section from your skirt and you join them together. Be careful of the placement when you are doing this. We can repeat the process again. Take your band, glue it to the skirt. The best thing to do for the skirt is to glue in sections, so I do a third at a time. That just means there's less chance of the glue sticking to itself. After completing the first section, I go in and do the middle section and repeat the process with contact cement. This is what your skirt will look like after 2 sections are complete. Now to finish the third. After completing the skirt, I have a bit left over, so I'm going to measure out 6 inches and then cut that part off. So as you can see, I've almost finished the skirt. You might be asking how this is going to work. What you need to do is turn your band upside down so your skirt points up the way. Then you're going to push each section down as best you can. You can turn the skirt around and do the back, or you can also do this on a mannequin. As you can see, the skirt has really nice flow to it. That's because it's the 1mm EVA. To shape the skirt even more, you can use a heat gun. After pushing this down into shape, it's looking a lot better. So now I can go in and finish the back. I score a few lines onto the foam. I take my Velcro and I cut it into 4 strips of the same length. Then I glue 2 strips of Velcro on each side and then I can join them together. I used hot glue for this. The issue now is there's a big gap at the back. So what we need to do is find a way to join them together. I have too much material on one side, so I'm cutting off about 3 inches. I'm going to use the strip as a join. However, it can't be the full length of the skirt because I need to be able to get the skirt on and off. So I'll measure about halfway and I'll cut the strip that length. In the same way as before, I'm marking a few glue sections onto the underside of the skirt. Make sure that it's upside down when you do this. Then I'll apply contact cement to those sections and to the small piece of foam. I can now join those together. I tend to leave the upper back section open like this because you can't really see much. However, if you do want to try gluing in a zip, that could work. Now the skirt is complete, it's time for painting. First of all, I am heat sealing the skirt with a heat gun. To paint the skirt, you will need a flexible paint so that it doesn't crack. I'm using Flexi paint in white. I'm adding a white acrylic paint to thicken the consistency. I mix those together and then paint with a very large brush. The more paint you apply to the skirt, the heavier it will be and it will weigh it down. Obviously, using this technique will leave brush strokes, so I'm using a sponge to minimise them. I've also opted to hand paint this on because it's the look I want. You might prefer using something like airbrush paints, which can also be flexible. This foam is also now available in white, so you could always use that. I keep layering up the paint. It maybe takes about 5 layers for me to cover all the black. The only frustrating thing about Flexi paint is that it remains tacky until you apply a top coat. So to minimise the skirt sticking together, I've used old chairs to prop it up. As I already have a Pennywise skirt, I'm putting a twist on this new one. I'm basing it off of the Harlequin Pennywise doll from Wrens Fairy Realm. I apply a blue acrylic paint to the top of one half of the skirt. I then go in and add water to the paint to water it down. If you want your creation to look like my first Pennywise skirt, then just don't add any blue or pink and skip this step. I repeat this process with a red acrylic, which when watered down looks pink. I want my skirt to look dirty and grimy, so I apply a black acrylic to the top of the skirt and add some water and let it drip down. I feel the skirt still looks too clean, so I apply a watery black acrylic wash over the whole skirt. For this skirt, I've decided to weather it at the bottom. I'm applying a black acrylic, watering it down and then blending it upwards with a sponge. After painting the skirt, I went in with a top coat to remove any tackiness. So now I've completed the skirt. I really enjoy having the freedom to paint these skirts however I want. Thanks for watching. I look forward to seeing your skirts and how you paint yours.